Thank you so much, sir. A very good morning to all. Today is the first day of the workshop, and we hope it has been extremely productive for all the participants. I am Subandas, and I welcome everyone to the first technical session of the day and eighth of the workshop. It's an honor to have amongst us as resource person, Professor Lalrintluanga, who is presently the Dean of School of Social Sciences, Mizoram University, Aizawl, on the topic Dimensions of Human Rights Awareness in Mizoram. Professor Lalrintluanga has an enlightened teaching career of 28 years since he joined one of the premier institutes of Central Universities of India, the Northeastern Hill University. He also has, to his credit, an undergraduate teaching experience of 5 years before joining the then NEHU. He is a former Dean of Students' Welfare and Head of Public Administration Department, and at present, Dean of School of Social Sciences, Mizoram University. He has delivered 91 invited lectures on assigned topics at the national and state level. He has also presented papers in international seminars and conferences in De La Salle College of St. Benedict Deptt campus in Manila, Philippines, organized by Asian Association for Public Administration, Bangladesh Academy for Rural Development, Formula, organized by InSearch, and China Institute for Urban Governance, Shanghai Jiaotong University, China, organized by Asian Association for Public Administration. He has chaired several technical sessions in international and national seminars, numerous presentations and publications in reputed seminars and journals aside. He is the sole author of Mizoram Development of Politico-Administrative System and Statehood, along with two co-authored books, New Public Management in India, Problems and Perspectives, and Consumer Awareness and Consumer Protection. He has also contributed a number of chapters in books published by renowned international and national publishers. He is a chief editor of a journal, Contemporary Social Scientist, published by the School of Social Sciences, and also the editorial board member of another reputed journal, Administrative Studies, published by the Department of Public Administration, Mizoram University. He is the life member of Indian Institute of Public Administration, Indian Public Administration Association, Indian Political Science Association, Northeast India Political Science Association, Northeast India Historical Association, and Mizoram Political Science Association. We welcome you, sir, on behalf of the entire organizing committee, and we would now request you to begin your technical session. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This morning, I feel privileged and honored for inviting me as one of the resource persons. Therefore, I express my heartfelt thanks to the organizers of this ICSSR NERC sponsored 1 week interdisciplinary national workshop on human rights, education, issues and challenges in Northeast India, which is being organized by Center for Ethnic Studies and Research, Guwahati, in collaboration with Department of Political Science, Moridal College, Dhemaji, and Department of Political Science, Morrigan College, Morrigan. Initially, I couldn't make any decisions whether I would comply with the request from the pandas or not, because we have so many problems after the introduction of the new system of conducting exams by the UGC. The dean of school today is much more than very busy, I should say, than the dean of schools after 10 to 20 years back. There are so many works and there is no rest. But in spite of that, I don't want to let down the invitation extended to me by the pandas, because I have come to know from him that this center was the center where my guru, Professor Niru Hazarika, deeply participated. And I also learned from him that my guru, Professor Niru Hazarika, passed away some days back. Therefore, I respect her soul. That's why I didn't want to let the invitation down, and I have complied with. And I know it pretty well that I am not by nature a good speaker or an orator. In spite of that, I have started up to speak on dimensions of human rights in Mizoram, perhaps in commemoration of my old guru, Professor Niru Hazarika. And let me go a little bit further. And Professor Niru Hazarika was my teacher as well as my mother, I should say. I received motherly treatment from her. That's why I am very shocked by her untimely demise. Therefore, today I am going to speak on dimensions of human rights awareness in Mizoram regarding the concept and theoretical frameworks of human rights. I hope our first speaker, Professor Aizawl might have dwelled on the concept and theoretical framework of human rights because he is one of the authors. He means Professor Aizawl He is one of the authors. He is one of the renowned scholars in human rights studies. That's why I have assumed that Professor Aizawl might have already dwelt on the concept and theoretical frameworks of human rights. That's why I'll not delve into the concept and theoretical frameworks of human rights, and I'll do it only up to that extent that, though it will help my today's lecture. And with the founding of the United Nations in 1945, shortly after the Second World War, the expression human rights came into being and prominence at the national and international levels. Today, human rights studies occupy the center stage in the academic circles, irrespective of their disciplines. Though I am teaching public administration, which is not law, but even in public administration, we have been teaching human rights within international administration paper. That's why even other departments are now teaching at least some features of human rights in the respective subjects. Therefore, the study of or the teaching of human rights is gaining more and more ground in our academic circles. Human rights are defined as those rights and freedom which belong to human beings. Human beings are human beings have the right human rights, I said, and these human rights are the rights possessed by persons to live a life of freedom and dignity by virtue of being human or human beings. And if so, even the beggars or those sleeping on the street or those sleeping in the railway platform are also having human rights. Though human rights derive their origin from the theory of natural rights, we call them human rights because rights are no longer derived from the operations of natural reasons, but from what is called human. And thus, human rights tend to give all people moral claims on the behavior of individual and collective agents and on the social arrangements, and are universal. Human rights are universal, inalienable, and indivisible. Sorry, let me use water. According to McFarland, human rights are those moral rights which are owed to its men and women solely by reasons of being called human. And justice, our Indian justice is J.S. Verma, chairman of National Human Rights Commission, also once said, human rights are non-negotiable as they are inherent in human existence. Hence, they do not depend on conferment by any authority or any power, either at the national or international level. Now, the concept of human rights encompasses several rights. Hence, there is no universally accepted definitions of the term human rights. And the question as to what constitutes human rights remains debatable till today. Now, from the first session till today, you have been listening to different lectures given by different resource persons on different dimensions of human rights. Then from what you have listened to, you can come to know that the concept of human rights is very vast and it is still in the process of developing. And that is why till today, there can be no any universally accepted definitions of human rights. And the question as to what constitutes human rights remain debatable till today. However, the concept of human rights has over time been expanding in response to the spread of the very horizons of human rights, which has been brought about by the fast pace of economic transformations witnessed in the last few decades in the larger part of the world. Therefore, in 1979, a Czech jurist, Karel Vasak. Let me repeat. In 1979, a Czech jurist, Karel Vasak, introduced the three generations of human rights to correspond to the three tenets of French Revolution, such as liberty, equality, and fraternity. Accordingly, classification of human rights has been made on the basis of generations. Well, now I'd like to introduce those generations to you today. The first generation refers mainly to civil and political rights of individuals. Here, the first generation gives importance to yourself and myself. I, my, okay? And therefore, today we are under pandemic, COVID pandemic. And today, what the Western democracies were supporting those days is not working to my understanding. If you say I, my, under the horror of COVID pandemic, it means you are going to contract the disease within no time. But the first generation of human rights refers mainly to civil and political rights of the individuals, means giving importance to the individual rights. Therefore, Western democratic emphasize still today civil and political rights, such as freedom of speech, expression, and press. And they regard human rights norms as universally applicable and feel all governments should abide by those norms regardless of their cultural, social, and political system. However, the first generation human rights has been broadened with the inputs of socialist states and the third world states or countries to incorporate a wide range of economic, social, and cultural rights. And unlike Western democracies, the socialist states and the third world countries give priority to economic, social, and cultural guarantees, such as right to food, clothing, decent housing, human working condition, and education. And in this regard, the contributions of our national government is very great. Even after privatization of our economy, our government of India is still trying to ensure decent housing and human working conditions and education. Take, for example, we find some urban programs of the Indian government, like housing for all, okay? And where privatization was in the process of coming up. And I thought our government of India might have forsaken or might have left her welfare stance. But till today, even our government is still trying to ensure this our rise to food, then rise to clothing and decent housing, then our right to human working conditions and education. Today, regarding education, many of our elementary school going children are provided with free school supplies, means exercise books and textbooks. And apart from that, they are also given this midday meal. The government has done up to that extent in order to guarantee different rights, such as right to food or right to education. Anyway, the socialists and the third world countries are good at. Human rights norms are cultural specific and should not be blindly applied across cultures and social systems. Hence, the second generation human rights are concerned with social, economic, and cultural security. Further, the third generation human rights include rise to development. And under this rise to development, we find peace. We know the importance of peace, then more equitable socio-economic order, and sustainable development. And apart from this, these third generation human rights include one's own cultural heritage. One's own cultural heritage, then protection of environment and natural resources.
I'm requesting everyone to please mute their mics.
Yes, according to Professor Adil Wasin and Archana Upadhyay, the last two types of human rights, such as the second generation and the third generation human rights, are more related to groups and community. Means, according to them, the last two types of human rights relates more to the groups and community rights rather than individual rights. And in recent years, well, I started looking into the literature on human rights. There was not, in fact, any fourth generation of human rights. But in recent years, different analysts claim that the fourth generation of human rights is emerging to include those rights that cannot be included in the third generation, and future claims of the first and the second generation human rights. And therefore, today, we find, though it is not concrete enough, but we are coming across the fourth generation human rights, which is related to information and communication technologies and cyberspace. In short, some of the analysts believe that the fourth generation human rights is given by human rights. In religions, while other prefers to talk about digital rights. I think we are very much familiar with this. And each of us is using WhatsApp or FB, Facebook. Then we are very particular. And not only this, and I hope here in our university, the moment UGC University Grant Commission circulated its guidelines for public research and publication ethics, we are very much concerned about the fourth generation human rights, that is digital rights. And we have been teaching this course to our pre-PhD coursework. Anyway, let us go back. I will not. I would like to carry on because my time now is already 11, and my time might be too short. That's why let me try to go fast because I do not speak fast by nature. That's yes. Now digital rights. Digital rights includes the right to equally access computing and digital spaces, and the right to digital self-determination, and the right to digital security, and the right to access one's own digital data. Even now, we are conducting workshops through online platform. And even here, some of the organizations organizing this type of online seminar are very particular in using the software to be used because they want to maintain security. This, according to them, it is their right to preserve their data. Even today, all whatever we have said is being recorded, and the authority over these recorded materials are those who are organizing this webinar. Okay, in summary, it can be put forward that the first generation's human rights are related to individual rights or liberty. Then the second generation human rights are concerned with social, economic, and cultural security. Then the third generation human rights include, among others, rights to development, then rights to one own cultural heritage, and the right of indigenous people. Under this, we find political self-determination and control over socio-economic development. Then the fourth generation human rights or digital rights are concerned with ICT, information and communication technology, and cyberspace. In this piece of work, I'm going to make an attempt to discuss dimensions of human rights awareness under different situations in Mizoram with reference to the generational classifications of human rights. I hope we still remember the generational classification of human rights, the first generation human right, the second generation human right, then the third generation human right, and of late, the fourth generation human rights, which is called, we also call digital rights. Now, I'm going to discuss the dimensions of human rights awareness among the people in Mizoram under different situations. First, I'd like to start our study of human rights under the traditional rule, means human rights awareness during traditional period. Now, as you all know, the indigenous people living in Mizoram are the Mizos or Zo ethnic tribes, who are traced as the origins of the tribes of Assam Burman group that branches from the Tibeto-Burman group of the main Tibeto-Chinese race. Well, the social formation of the Mizos was at its rudimentary stage. Each village living in and around the present Mizoram was ruled over by its own traditional chiefs or Lal, who was entirely independent of other chiefs, because there was no any central authority to coordinate relations among the different chiefs. That is why every chief was supreme within the jurisdiction of his own village. That's why Captain T.H. Lewin, who was the first British officers to have intimate knowledge about the Mizos, described their village system as a number of petty states, each under a dictator or president. And this clearly indicates that there was no any coordination or correlation or relations among the different traditional chiefs. Therefore, the chief of each village was the repository of all powers and the fountainhead of justice in village governance. Therefore, no one dare challenge any instructions or order from the traditional chief. In the carry out of his multiverse functions, the traditional chief was assisted by a council of elders or upa, and these council members, or in local term upas, were chosen by the chief himself without consulting anybody, because he was very much unfettered in his discretion while choosing his council members. Generally, the chief selected his council members from among the well-to-do families in his village, particularly those who perform one expensive sacrificial offerings called tangchua. And from among those people, the chief selected his council of elders. Thus, the mode of appointments of all the village functionaries by the chief shows that there was a limited scope for the common people to raise himself or herself to a poor positions in the traditional administrative system in Mizoram. Therefore, the chief was very supreme, and in the absence of any apex authority over them, each independent chiefs could enjoy a number of rights and privileges at the cost of their subjects. With the passage of time, some of the chiefs have started making excessive demands for some privileges from their subjects. Some of the villagers felt that the collection of party tax by the chief was sometimes too much, and therefore the people from their heart, from the bottom of their hearts, complains the inflated rate of collection of party tax from their subjects by the chief. But the people were very helpless, though the people insist that some of the villagers felt that the collection of party tax and other taxes by their chief was too inflated, and this indicated their human rights awareness as individuals, because under the chief, no one dared to organize others to fight against the authority of the chief. Therefore, even if they had individual human rights, they had no courage to stand against any directions from the government, not from the chief, sorry, the village government. The only instruments available to the villagers who are against the activities and actions of their chief was only migration. If a certain person was extremely unhappy with their chief, or if he felt that his individual rights was in danger because of the chief behaviors, then the only instruments available for him to show his displeasure was to change his loyalty from his own chief to another chief. Therefore, migration, secret migration was the only option for those who were not happy with the violation of their individual rights. Not to speak of third generation human rights, means their collective right. And to some extent, had they organized themselves to fight against the traditional chiefs with regards to his excessive collection of taxes, like fatang means party tax, then it could be called second generation human rights. But there was no any network among the villagers. Therefore, every villager stood by himself or herself alone. That was the situation where they are. Therefore, we have found that there were some instances of first generation human rights awareness among the traditional Mizos against their chief, but they could not ease out their grievances before their chief because their chief enjoyed unlimited power and he was unfettered in his discretion. No one dared challenge his powers and function. Therefore, the only options for those who were not happy with their chief for fear because of the violation of their individual rights was to migrate to another village where which was ruled over by an opposing chief. Now let us switch over because time is going fast. The post-colonial human rights awareness among the Mizos. Let me tell you like this. Before the coming of the British, the present Mizoram was something like an untrodden land. But on seeing encroachments of their ancestral land by the British for tea plantation from the pen areas, some of the Mizo chiefs and their tribal hunters could not remain mere spectators. So, in order to oppose the ongoing British extension of tea gardens towards the foothills, the Mizo chiefs has successfully developed the third generation human rights and occasionally raided the pen areas. Let me tell you, those days, Ben Kuaya, who was one of the bravest and greatest chiefs of the Mizos, went as far as Chengri Valley. I do not know where Chengri Valley is. And he went as far as Munirkal. I don't know where it is. And they went as far as Alexanderpur. I have not yet gone to this place. I do not know where they are. But for your information, they had come down as far as these areas in order to oppose the ongoing extension of tea gardens by the British rulers. Then, in response to the sporadic raids committed by the Mizo chiefs and their hunters, the British had to occupy the present Mizoram. Those days, it was called Lusai Hills. Though the occupation of the then Lusai Hills was against the British interests, but it had to make an inroads into it and consolidate its powers, because the British wanted that the frontiers should be quiet, or in other words, the British wanted to maintain the frontiers quiet by subjugating the Mizo chiefs, who used to make he used to commit some kind of wars against the British. Therefore, against their economic interests, the British had to consolidate their power in the Lusai Hills, now called Mizoram, in 1890. Initially, the British administration thought that the occupation of the Mizo Hills would be economically a burden to them, while they occupied the place of Assam with a motive of exploitation and economic benefit to themselves. It is therefore evident that the motive behind the British occupation of the Lusai Hills was not to develop the territory, but to make the frontiers quiet. The frontiers quiet by subjugating their marauding chiefs. And their chiefs used to conduct intermittent raids on the pen areas where the British rulers were pursuing their commercial interest. Had not the Mizo chiefs raided the villages in Kasar and disturbed the workers of the tea gardens in Kasar and Sylhet, the British might have never occupied the Mizo Hills or the present Mizoram. Because till today, there is no any underground wells having economic importance. Okay, the British administration was very far-sighted. That's why they did not want to incur heavy expenditures for the installation of sophisticated administrative system here in the Lusai Hills those days. Yes, as consolidation of the powers in the Lusai Hills contradicted their economic interest, the British government had opted for the simplest system of administration to be introduced in the Lusai Hills. Accordingly, in order to incur expenditure, as I've said before, for the administration in the Lusai Hills, the Lusai Hills, now we call it Mizoram, the British administration followed the policy of the internal control of the villages by their own chief. And the principle was to impress upon the chiefs their responsibility for the maintenance of order in their villages. Thus, under the overall supremacy of the British superintendents, the Mizo chiefs became mere agents of the British administration or alien rulers, and they acted as liaison between the British administration and their own people. All these had greatly lowered the status of the Mizo chiefs before their subjects. According to A.C. McCall, the British rulers abolished many rights and prerogatives of the Mizo chiefs. Let me tell you, the first right and powers of the chief abolished by the British regime is was a right to order capital punishment, a right to order capital punishment, and one of the most beautiful daughter of one chief who fell in love with a commoner was killed. I think there is no harm in sharing her names. Lalrintluanga was a beautiful girl from the royal family who fell in love with one boy from among the commoners, and she was killed under the direction or under the order of her daddy. Until today, there is a graveyard where this beautiful lady was buried. Why I'm saying this, that is one of the evidences that prove that the traditional Mizo chiefs enjoyed right to order capital punishment. Then there are so many rights. Since my time is too so, it's already 11:26. I hope I can complete. Let me try to go a little bit fast. Then right to seize food stores and properties of villagers who wish to transfer their allegiance. As I have said, the only option before the villagers who were not happy with the administration of their chief was migration. When such kind of migration took place, then the chief could seize the food stores and properties of the villagers who had changed their loyalty from their own chief to another chief. Then a right to tax traders doing business within the chief's jurisdiction. Then right to freedom of actions in relation to making on-son chiefs under their own jurisdiction means, according to original custom and traditions, the youngest son of the chief, or even among the commoners, the youngest sons would inherit the ancestral property. But in order to minimize some kind of brawl or imbroglio or fight or quarrel among brothers, the British changed even the law of inheritance. No, I'll not take much time. Then the right to help boys. Many of, with due respect to the scholars from outside our community, many of the scholars translate these boys as slaves. They are not slaves. They cannot be sold and resold. Boys are dependents. Only the chief was entitled to boy system. These boys wholly depended on the chief, and the chief gave full security to the chief. That's why boys are not slaves, but they are dependents or paupers. Then right to freedom of actions in relations to other kinds of boys. There are different types of boys, Tuglu boys or Chimsin boys. There are so many. Since they are local terms, I think I need not dwell on that. Then right to attach the property of villagers when they wish when they wish to do so, without fault on the part of the villagers. Now, what we need to take note is that closely on the heels of the British administration came the Christian missionaries of Western origin. And these Christian missionaries introduced not theological education, but secular educations to the Mizoros. And let me cut it short like this. Over the passage of time, this education had brought then the outlook of the newly graduates, and they started acquainting themselves with freedoms and fraternity or freedom fighting and the like. Then they did not want to remain under the personal rule or of their traditional chiefs. And this was the first time, from my understanding, there was a concrete dimensions of third generation human rights awareness among the Mizos. Though the first school was established in 1896, and the first high school was set up in 1944, the mental horizon of the common masses was very much broadened. And under the government of India Act 1935, the then Lusai Hills, now called Mizoram, was excluded from the operation of the provincial government of Assam and the provincial politics of Assam. And in spite of that, a handful of enlightened boys came forward to ask for the British superintendent of that time to give political rights to them so that they should also be able to take part in the provincial politics of Assam and the provincial government of Assam. But at the time, their requests were flatly declined by the British superintendent. And to my understanding, this was the first time some kind of concrete awareness on their third generation human right was discernible among the Mizos. And ultimately, or initially, the British administration was antagonistic towards such kind of political consciousness among themselves in order to safeguard their right of self-determination. That is the third generation human right. But after realizing that their rule in India was coming to an end, the British superintendent, who was previously against any political move for democratization of the polity, had drastically changed his mind and started lending support to those enlightened Mizo commoners. Then the superintendent convened the district conference, wherein even these few number of newly educated members had participated. Now, what the superintendent wanted to do was to encourage or to lead or to teach or to lead the educated group of the Mizos to fight for self-determination. And the superintendent told them that if you are away, if you fight for British Crown Colony or British Protectorate, or if you join Burma, today we call it Myanmar, then you will be able to maintain some kind of independence. Even the original leadership of the first political party, called Mizo Union, was in favor of separate existence outside India. But with the passage of time, there was a leadership change even in the Mizo Union Party. Then the new leadership was in favor of joining the Indian Union to Assam, which was the only state in the whole of Northeast India. There were Manipur Raja and Tripura Raja, and the rest were under some government. Assam state government was our nodal or our parents' department. Now, as I have spelled out, there was third generation human rights awareness under the British rule. Then let us look into the post-independent human rights awareness. After Indian independence, much after Indian independence, let me go specific because our time is too short. in 1947, in 1947, that was the year of Indian independence. Before Indian independence, there were two political parties in the Dendusai Hills, now called Mizoram. Mizo Union, which was set up in 1946, and another one in 1947. And the separatist move, spearheaded by the British superintendent, was accepted by the second political party called United Mizo Freedom Organization. And they opted to join Burma rather than India. But after independence, the new Union government, through Assam, had given some kind of autonomy to the Dendusai Hills, now called Mizoram, and the subcommittee of the Constituent Assembly recommended. There is no time to go in detail. The subcommittee of the Constituent Assembly, which is called Boroloi subcommittee, recommended the sixth schedule to the Constitution of India, which till today has been giving autonomy to some parts of Northeast India. Now, and for the first time, the district council was given to the Dendusai Hills, and afterwards it was called Mizo Hills, under the sixth schedule Constitution of India. Accordingly, the Chief Minister of Assam, B. Ramedi, inaugurated the Mizo District Councils on 25 April 1952. And after the installation of the district administrative machineries, election was conducted, and in this, the first democratic election, the Mizo Union, which was against the continuity of traditional system of governance, won a thumping majority and formed the executive council of the district. And in the first session of the autonomous district council, the Mizo Union moved that the traditional system of administration meant by traditional chiefs should be abolished, and in their places, democratic setup like village councils should be installed in the different parts of the area. Then, yes, well, even the state government, some government was very considerate, and the resolution passed by the first session of the district council was approved by the state government, and accordingly, the traditional chiefs were abolished, and in their places, democratic institutions called village councils had been set up. But unfortunately, in 1955, there was a mountain famine breaking out. And before that, the district, what you need to know is that the district council, manned by the Mizo Union, was an ally, or it was running the government in alliance with the state government, which was run by the Congress. Means state government means Assam government. In some state, the government was formed by the Congress, and the Mizo Union councillors work hand in glove with those elected members of the Congress. Though they could gel very well before, but after bringing to the notice of the state government that maritime famine was about to occur in the near future. Then they failed to receive good response from their let's say political gurus. And when they came back, they were very unhappy. They were very unhappy with the message, the message that they had brought for their own people. Then they felt very helpless, and taking full advantage of these frictions between the state government and the Mizo district councils, the Mizo National Front, those days it was the Mizo National Front, Mizo National Female Front, organized the youths to help out those people suffering from famine. Then the volunteers of the Mizo National Female Front earned a good name for the devoted works of their youth. Therefore, the Mizo National Female Front was very popular with the Mizo people. Now, these Mizo Female Front was the origin of Mizo National Front. And this Mizo National Front fought against India for independence. And since my time is too short, I hope I can go a little bit. Let me stop here. Then another dimension of human rights awareness is post-insurgent human rights. In the post-insurgent human rights, we find the third generation human rights, the security personnel group so many villages, and many people were affected by this grouping of villages. And I do not find any other any grouping of villages in any other parts of our country, but so many villages were grouped. Even when I was an elementary school going children, my village was grouped to another village. Now there are different types of grouping of villages. I will not delve into them because our time is too short. And what I want to emphasize is that those days there were so many alleged violations of individual rights as well as third generation human rights, and which is why the retired Brigadier T. Silo set up a human rights committee in Mizoram, and this human rights committee started collecting cases of human rights violations. And after collecting these human rights violations from the people, then they had prepared themselves to bring the case to the Guwahati High Court. Though they did it, until today, they have not received any replies from Guwahati High Court. Now let me tell you like this. First, grouping of villages was done without any concrete idea, but just to cut off supply lines for the MNF persons. And afterwards, in 1968, there was another type of new group centers, and these new group centers affected 50,000 people, and 182 villages were grouped into 40 group centers. Imagine 182 villages were grouped into 40 villages. And this was done under the supervision of the security forces. Then there was another type of groupings, voluntary grouping centers. Under these voluntary grouping centers, 110 villages were grouped into 26 villages. Though they were called voluntary grouping centers, they are not. They were grouped under the strong directions of order of the security forces. Then these new group centers was started in 1969 and it was completed in 1970. Now, there was another type of grouping of villages, which is called extended loop groupings in the extended loop area. And under this extended loop area, 63 villages with a population of 40,000 in the areas bordering Manipur in the north and Burma in the east, now called Myanmar, and with these people, 40,000 people were grouped in 17 grouping centers. Now, from the light of this, you might be able to imagine how much, to what extent, there was human rights violations. In those days, the people were almost treated like sheep, okay, or cattle, being driven by the owner of the cattle. Likewise, they did not say any rights under the horror of insurgency. Now, grouping of villages under different schemes affected 80% of the 80% of the total rural population in the then Mizo districts, and about 65% of the total population in the Mizo districts. Those days, let me tell you, after grouping, all the male members of the houses from the group centers were required to contribute for fencing their villages with wooden and bamboo spikes. And while doing this, they were not given a single piece. They had to do fencing of their respective villages under compulsion free of cost. And in the meanwhile, for those people who have migrated from their ancestral lands to the new group centers, had to build their makeshift houses. No one could help them. No sanction from the government for erecting or building their makeshift house, and not to speak of this fencing of the villages. And after well fencing, they would open only one or two main gates through which the villagers should move out and in. And this was meant for checking the supply lines between the supply lines for the MNA personnel. Then it was against this background that the government of Assam has sent delegations to the Mizo Hills to make an on-the-spot assessments of the people's sufferings due mainly to military excesses. And the members of the delegation that visited Mizoram were Gauri Shankar, an opposition leader of the Assam Legislative Assembly, then Panki Bora, then Nakul Das, and Ethang Lura. But the Mizo public opinion have not yet known even a single line contents of the report submitted to the Assam government till today, like the case filed with the Guwahati High Court with regards to alleged gross human violations under insurgency. Now, under insurgency, there was a strong wave of third generation human rights awareness for self-determination, and for separate existence, then today we have come across human rights awareness in the millennium. The human rights awareness in the millennium is, to my understanding, very much different from the previous human rights awareness. There is a new dimensions of human right awareness among the Mizos in the new millennium, which is oriented towards the first generation human rights. And today is my life. My is having more and more places. Is my is gaining more and more places in the hearts of the new generation. And now, after the declaration of the war on drugs and liquor by the biggest civil society, there have been alleged violations of individual human rights at the hands of some members of the civil society. And these allegations of human rights violations, especially of individual human rights, have become more prominent where the lawbreakers were arrested by some active members of the civil society. Although most of these individual lawmakers, while arrested, have admitted that their activities were illegal, anti-governmental, and antisocial. They were very much aware of their individual human rights and are more critical about the violation of their individual human rights than ever before. As the Mizos are not strictly bound by their social customs and traditions to be loyal to the society anymore. They are gradually influenced by the first generation human rights, means political and civil rights of the individuals. Hence, people have become less concerned with the protection of their collective or group rights, that is third generation, while being arrested for violation of any Prohibition Act. Most of the lawbreakers are rather tempted to make full use of their first generation human rights awareness as the most effective instruments for protecting their individuals' human rights. After the formation of some human rights groups within the state, people tend to give priority to the protection of individual rights, despite the relevance of the second and third generation has not yet died a natural death in the hearts of so many in the society. This controversial change of human rights awareness among the people leads to an ending debate over the question of protection of individual rights at the cost of societal interest in the Mizo society. Then recently, corresponding to the first generation human rights, yes, that is, to mind this, it is that is concerned with ICT, information communication technology, and cyberspace. Now, the new generations are very much influenced by this fourth generation human rights, and it influenced the present generation in two ways. One in the positive way, and another one in the negative way. Now, let me share with you the negative way. Today, the new generations are more possessive and they're more assertive, and whether they are highly educated or not, but they must consist of their first generation human right and their rights in connection with the fourth generation human right. Therefore, this fourth generation human right is now developing, and it is going to mind. I don't know whether the observation of our learned professors at the national level, I do not know their rating, but from my observations, the fourth generation of human right is in the process of coming up. It has not yet attained a complete stage. That is how I understand. And those are the main generations of those are the dimensions of human rights awareness in Mizoram, and our discussion has been based on the generational classifications of human rights. I think I have to cut short here because, according to my words, there are only 4 minutes.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for such an elaborate presentation. You've spoken about the history of Mizoram, and it was really enlightening to listen your speech on the human rights dimensions in Mizoram. Any questions on behalf of the participants regarding today's session will be welcomed. Any questions?
Yes, myself.
Yeah.
Good morning, sir. A very good morning. Myself, Dr. Mayuri Sharma from Guwahati University. I am very much, overwhelmed with the elaborate presentation you have made on the human rights and violation of human rights in Mizoram. Now, sir, as a student, I feel that education has a close relationship with human rights awareness. So, and as we know that Mizoram as a state is having a very high rate of literacy. So, what do you think, as we understand, human rights has two forms. One is awareness of my own rights and awareness of others' rights. That so what do you feel like, as a researcher, you were also there and you're observing. So what is the level of awareness of these both two kinds of rights in the Mizo people as a whole? I'm not saying about the highly educated, but in the grassroots.
Yes, thank you very much for your positive questions. Let me confess, from my assessment, our human rights awareness, particularly collective or group human rights awareness, was once very high, but due to the dilution caused by materialistic world or developments in the material world, the third generation human rights or group or collective human rights was, from my point of view, on the wane, means declined. And the first generation human rights means what awareness on individual rights has been gaining more and more ground. That was how I assessed. But in recent years, there is, I have found, there is a balance between third generation and first generation human rights awareness among the Mizoris, because those days there may, from among you, there may be some activists I do not know. Our activists were very active as activists, and wherever they went and wherever they go, they preach these individual human rights at the cost of the societal interest. But through academic discourse, where I also participated and reacted to the submissions made by those activists now, our human rights awareness, whether in relation to the first generation human right or the third generation human right or to the third generation human right now. From my point of view, there is a balance. And I don't know how to rate our human rights awareness level, whether it is high or not. But as of now, we are a little bit okay. That is how I say. I think that will answer your question. I hope.
Thank you, sir. Actually, my question was pointed towards the current, crisis between Mizos and Assamese regarding the border issues. And there also, I think, a violation of human rights, because we were also entitled with some rights and the Mizos were also. So what is the kind of awareness, if you don't mind? I had to ask this. Thank you so much.
Sir, your mic has been muted, sir.
Sorry. And both either the Mizos or the Sam have the right to stake claims, because the British left us without making any clear-cut, without drawing any clear-cut boundary lines between Assam and Mizoram. That's why both the parties, I should say, have the right to stake claims. And at this stage, and this current movement in relation to boundary has been changing the mental horizon of our youths. Though till almost last year, most of our youths could be seen as giving importance to their first generation individual human rights, but today things has been changing. There is an appreciable change in the human rights awareness of our youths, and today most of the youths, except those facing some pockets, are aware of the importance of their third generation human rights, that is the protection of their land. I think that may be clear. Since it is.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, thank you, ma'am, for the question. Sir, I have been asked to get a PPT presentation of your particular session. If you could give us the PPT presentation for the benefit of the participants, it would be great for us, sir.
No, excuse me. Initially, I thought I should prepare a PowerPoint presentation, but I drastically changed my mind, thinking that the time given to me is only 1 hour and 15 minutes, and I won't be able to cover my lectures. And if I do not have any write-up and all that or PPT, it is possible to cut short when the situation demands. That's why I simply give lectures.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you. All right,
sorry for that.
I think we should conclude here because it's already 12:03 and we have the next up technical session in line. We'll wrap up this particular session with thank you so much, sir, again on behalf of the entire organizing committee for such a wonderful presentation. We'll move forward, and now
it's my pleasure to be invited. Okay.
Thank you so much.
I feel honored.
All right, sir. Moving ahead, we will have, I don't know if there will be a technical break right now because we are already 4:12. The next technical session is technical session 9, which will be headed by the resource person of which is Professor Bimala Devi, Department of Political Science, Manipur University, Manipur. The topic of which is women rights in Manipur. We'll proceed to that particular session, and this session hereby concludes here. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. I hope I can leave. Am I right?
Yes, sure, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Now it is time for tea break. The next session will start from 12:15. This session is over now.